I, 24F, have always known that my sister Clara was the favorite. It was never a secret. It was a fact of our lives, as certain as the sun rising in the east. When we were children, her drawings were masterpieces. Mine were scribbles. Her scraped knees earned a week of coddling. My broken arm was an inconvenience that messed up the family's vacation plans. I learned early on to be self-sufficient, to not expect much, and to swallow my disappointment. It was easier that way. Keeping the peace was my primary role in the family. I was the quiet one, the easy one, the one who never made waves. Clara was the star, and my parents were her devoted audience. I was the stagehand, working silently in the wings to make sure her spotlight never flickered. But there is a line between favoritism and cruelty, between neglect and abandonment. I just never knew where that line was until I was staring at it from a bed in the intensive care unit. It started with a fever I could not shake. Then came the chills that rattled my bones, followed by a confusion so deep I could not remember my own address. I vaguely remember calling for an ambulance myself, my fingers fumbling with the phone. My parents were out at a dinner preparing for Clara's upcoming 25th birthday party. The party was all they talked about for months. It was going to be the event of the season, a testament to their success and their perfect family. The next thing I knew, I was in a hospital bed with tubes and wires sprouting from me like some grotesque garden. A doctor with tired eyes told me I had sepsis. My body was shutting down. The words were clinical and terrifying. He said they had called my parents. They arrived hours later, their faces a mask of strained concern. My mother patted my hand, her touch as light and meaningless as a feather. My father stood at the foot of the bed, checking his watch. "Well, you've really done it this time," my mother said, her voice a low murmur. It was not gentle. It was accusatory. My father cleared his throat. "The doctors say it's serious. They're doing everything they can." "Clara's party is on Saturday," my mother stated, not as a question, but as a problem I had created. I could barely speak. My throat was raw. "I'm sorry," I whispered. It was an automatic response, the one I had been trained to give my entire life. Sorry for being sick. Sorry for being a problem. They stayed for about an hour. They talked over me, mostly about the party arrangements. The caterer, the guest list, the custom dress Clara was having made. It was like I was not even there. Or maybe they just wished I was not. The nurse came in to check my vitals, and they used it as their excuse to leave. "We should let you rest," my father said, already backing toward the door. "We'll be back tomorrow," my mother promised, but her eyes were already looking past me, toward the future where this was all over, and she could get back to what was important. I knew they would not be back tomorrow. Not really. They would make an appearance, a brief, dutiful visit. But their hearts, their minds, their energy were all focused on Clara's party. I lay there, listening to the steady beep of the monitor that was tracking my failing heart, and I felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the fever. It was the coldness of realizing that your own parents might not love you enough to be scared when you are dying. The next day, they did come. They stayed for 20 minutes. They brought a magazine that I was too weak to read. They talked about the florist. They talked about a cousin who was being difficult about his +1. They did not ask me how I was feeling. They did not ask what the doctors were saying. They just filled the space with their own anxieties, which all revolved around a single, glittering event. "Your father has to pick up the cake on Friday," my mother said, as if this was a critical piece of information I needed. "And Clara's final dress fitting is tomorrow. It's just been one thing after another." I nodded weakly. I did not have the strength to do anything else. On the third day, the day before the party, things got worse. My breathing became shallow. The alarms on my machine started screaming more often. The doctor came in and spoke to my parents in the hallway. I could not hear the words, but I saw the grim look on his face. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. I saw my father's shoulders slump. For a fleeting moment, I thought, they see it now. They finally understand. They came back into the room. My mother's eyes were red. My father looked pale. They're saying it's critical, my mother whispered, her voice trembling. My father put his arm around her. We're not going to lose her, he said, but it sounded like he was trying to convince himself. They sat with me. For the first time, they were quiet. They just sat there, watching me. The silence was heavy, thick with unspoken fears. I drifted in and out of consciousness. I was aware of their presence, a heavy weight in the corner of the room. I thought maybe this was it. The moment everything changed. The moment they realized I was their daughter too, not just an obstacle to their social calendar. I was wrong. Late that night, I woke up. The room was dark except for the glow of the monitors. I heard their voices, low and urgent, from the small family waiting area just outside my door, which had been left slightly ajar. We can't just leave, my father said. His voice was strained. And we can't miss it, my mother shot back, her whisper sharp as a razor. Do you have any idea how much money we've spent? What will people say? Clara will be devastated. It's her 25th birthday. She's in there, possibly dying, he argued, his voice cracking. There was a pause. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. Please, I prayed to no one. Please let him win this one. Then my mother spoke, her voice dropping to a cold, flat tone that I knew all too well. It was the voice she used when she was about to say something she considered the final, undeniable truth. She's not dying, she said with chilling certainty. She's being dramatic. She has always been like this, always needing attention at the worst possible times. It's a bad flu, and she's milking it for all it's worth. We will go to the party. We will be there for our daughter, the one who isn't trying to ruin everything. The silence that followed was my father's surrender. I did not need to hear him agree. The absence of his protest was my answer. He had folded. He always folded. I closed my eyes. The beeping of the machine beside me sounded like a countdown. A tear slid down my temple and into my hair. It was not a tear of sadness. It was a tear of pure crystalline rage. They were leaving. They were choosing a party over their child in the ICU. They were calling my fight for life a dramatic performance. That was the line. They had not just crossed it, they had obliterated it. And in its place, something new and hard was beginning to form inside of me. It was a decision. A decision that if I survived this, nothing would ever be the same again. The quiet, easy daughter was gone. She died right there in that ICU bed, listening to her mother call her a liar. The next morning, a different nurse was on duty. She was brisk and efficient. She did not have the gentle touch of the previous one. She checked my IV, wrote on her chart, and barely looked at me. Your parents left a note, she said, gesturing to the small table beside my bed. She left the room without another word. My hand trembled as I reached for the folded piece of paper. It was my mother's handwriting, elegant and loopy. Dearest, had to go take care of some things for the party. Clara needs us. We will be back as soon as we can. Be strong. Love Mom and Dad. There was no mention of my worsening condition. No apology. Just a statement of their priorities. Clara needs us. The implication was clear. You do not. The note felt like a stone in my hand, heavy and cold. I let it fall to the floor. I did not have the energy to hold on to it. I did not have the energy for anything but the slow, rhythmic struggle to breathe. I spent the day of the party alone. The hours stretched on, marked only by the nurse's visits and the changing patterns of light on the ceiling. I felt a profound sense of abandonment, a loneliness so complete it was like a physical presence in the room. The machines beeped. The IV dripped. My body fought a war I was not sure I was winning, and the people who were supposed to be my generals had deserted the field. That evening, a new nurse came on shift. She had kind eyes and a soft voice. Her name tag said, Sarah. How are you feeling, honey? She asked, adjusting my pillow. Alone. I managed to rasp out. Her expression softened with pity. Your family hasn't been by today? I shook my head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. My sister's birthday party is tonight. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. She tried to hide her surprise, but I saw it. Oh, she said simply. Well, let's get you comfortable. She took a moment to straighten my blankets, an act of kindness so small and so profound it almost made me cry. She did not say anything else about my family, but her silence was more comforting than any platitude. She understood. Later that night, I could not sleep. The pain and the fever were a constant roaring fire. I fumbled for my phone, which had been on the bedside table, untouched for days. My fingers were clumsy, but I managed to unlock it. I do not know what I was looking for. Maybe just a distraction. I opened social media. It was a mistake. The first thing I saw was a photo posted by one of my cousins. It was a group shot from the party. In the center stood my parents, beaming with their arms around Clara. Clara was wearing a stunning silver dress. She looked like a princess. My mother was laughing, her head thrown back in pure joy. My father was holding a glass of champagne, a proud smile on his face. The caption read, "Celebrating Clara's 25th. So much fun with the family." I scrolled. There were more, dozens of them. Pictures of the decadent cake, the elaborate decorations, the string quartet playing in the corner. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was happy. My entire family was celebrating, and I was not there. I was here in this sterile white room, fighting for every breath. Then I saw it. The post that shattered what was left of my heart. It was a video my aunt had posted. My father was standing on a small stage, microphone in hand, giving a speech. The crowd was silent, listening intently. "I just want to say," my father's voice boomed from the tiny phone speaker, "how proud I am of my family, my beautiful wife who planned this incredible night, and my two wonderful daughters, Clara and—" He paused, and for a second I thought he had forgotten my name. Then he continued, "who I love more than words can say. To family." "To family," the crowd echoed. He loved his two wonderful daughters. He said it. He said it while one of them was in the ICU, abandoned by him. The hypocrisy was so staggering it made me feel dizzy. The lie was so bold, so public. They were not just neglecting me in private. They were erasing my reality in public, painting a picture of a perfect, loving family that was a complete and utter fraud. I felt a surge of something hot and powerful course through me. It was stronger than the fever, sharper than the pain. It was rage. A pure, clarifying rage. This was not a simple act of choosing one child over another. This was a calculated performance. They were using my sister's party to project an image, and my illness was an inconvenient truth they had decided to edit out of the story. My thumb hovered over the screen. I saw a picture of the gift. It was a brand new car, a sporty little convertible with a giant red bow on the hood. Clara was leaning against it, posing like a model. The caption, written by my mother, said, "Nothing is too good for our birthday girl. Happy 25th, sweetie." Nothing is too good for her. But for me? A note on a nightstand. A lie in a public speech. The dregs of their attention. The rage did not fade. It cooled. It hardened. It settled deep in my bones. A new kind of strength. I knew then that getting better was no longer just about survival. It was about justice. I was going to get better. And then, I was going to get even. I started to think. My mind, which had been a fog of pain and confusion, began to clear. I needed proof. I needed more than just my own memory of their words. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. I looked at the phone in my hand. This was a start. I took screenshots of everything. The photos. The video of my father's speech. The caption my mother wrote. I saved them all to a secure folder. The next morning, Sarah, the nurse, was back. "You look a little brighter today," she said, checking my monitors. "Your numbers are a bit better." "I have a question," I said. my voice still weak but firmer than before. Can I get a copy of my medical records? She looked at me, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Of course, it's your right. You'll need to sign a release form. I can get that for you. Thank you, I said. I want everything. From the moment I was admitted. All the doctor's notes, the test results, the charts from the ICU. For your records? She asked gently. Yes, I said. For my records. She nodded, understanding that there was more to it, but professional enough not to pry. I'll get the paperwork started. Later that day, my parents finally showed up. They swept into the room, bringing with them the scent of stale champagne and expensive perfume. They looked tired, but happy. Fulfilled. We're here, my mother announced, as if she had just completed a heroic journey. She placed a wilting bouquet of flowers on my table. The party was a huge success. Everyone was asking about you, of course. We told them you had a nasty flu and we didn't want you to spread it, my father added, a little too quickly. We said you were resting comfortably at home. The lies were so effortless. They flowed from them like water. I looked from my father to my mother. Their faces were open, their smiles genuine. They truly believed they had done the right thing. Or, at the very least, they believed they had gotten away with it. I decided to test them. Just a little. It sounds like it was a great party, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Oh, it was. My mother gushed. Clara was so happy. You should have seen her face when we gave her the car. It was worth every penny. A car? I asked, feigning surprise. Wow, that's a big gift. My father puffed out his chest. She deserved it. She's been working so hard. Clara worked part-time at a boutique. I was in my final year of a demanding university program, holding down 2 jobs to pay for it because my parents said they needed to focus their resources on Clara's social life. That's wonderful, I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I felt a small, dark part of me take notes. They are proud of this. They feel no guilt. This is not a mistake they regret. It is a choice they stand by. We were so worried about you, though, my mother said, her tone shifting to one of practiced sympathy. We called the hospital 3 times yesterday. Oh? I asked. I didn't get any messages. Well, we called the nurses' station, my father clarified, a hint of defensiveness in his voice. We didn't want to bother you while you were sleeping. I made a mental note to ask Sarah about that. I had a feeling I already knew the answer. They were building their alibi, constructing a narrative of concerned parents who were doing their best under difficult circumstances. But I had been in the room. I had heard the truth. And now I was going to dismantle their story, piece by piece. They did not stay long. They had to go help Clara with her new car insurance. They kissed my forehead, their lips cool against my still feverish skin, and then they were gone again. I was alone, but I did not feel lonely anymore. I felt focused. I had a purpose. When Sarah came in later, I asked her. My parents said they called the nurses' station a few times yesterday to check on me. Did you get any calls? Sarah's face was unreadable. She busied herself with my IV drip. The call log doesn't show any incoming calls to this station for you yesterday, honey. Not from anyone listed as your family. There it was. Another lie. A small one, but it was part of the pattern. They were not just neglectful. They were actively deceptive. They were not just absent. They were covering their tracks. Thank you for checking, I said quietly. She looked at me then, her professional mask slipping for a moment. You focus on getting stronger, she said, her voice full of a warmth my own mother could not seem to muster. That's the most important thing right now. I knew she was right. My body was still weak, but my resolve was made of iron. I had the screenshots. The medical records were on their way, and I had the truth. It was not much, but it was a start. My parents had built their perfect family narrative on a foundation of lies and my silence. They had no idea that the foundation was about to crumble. and I was going to be the one holding the hammer. A few days later, I was moved out of the ICU and into a regular room. The change felt monumental. I could sit up in bed without feeling like I was going to pass out. I could eat solid food. The fog in my brain was lifting, replaced by a sharp, cold clarity. My body was healing, and my mind was busy planning. I received a large manila envelope from the hospital's records department. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were pages and pages of medical jargon, charts, and notes. I spent hours reading through it, using my phone to look up terms I did not understand. Patient admitted with severe sepsis secondary to an unknown infection. Hypotensive crisis. Acute respiratory distress. Multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. The words were clinical and stark. They painted a picture of a body on the brink of collapse. At the bottom of one of the ICU physician's notes, a sentence was underlined. Prognosis is guarded. Next 48 hours are critical. The date on that note was the day of Clara's party. I carefully placed the documents back in the envelope. This was my proof. This was the objective truth that would stand against their narrative of a nasty flu. My illness was not drama. It was a life-threatening emergency. And they had left. My thoughts turned to the car. My mother's words echoed in my head. It was worth every penny. Where did they get the money for a brand new car? My parents were comfortable, but they were not wealthy. They lived in a nice house in a good neighborhood, but they were always complaining about expenses. They had recently told me they could not afford to help with my final year of tuition, which was why I was working 2 jobs. So how did they suddenly have enough disposable income for such an extravagant gift? A dark suspicion began to form in my mind. A few years ago, my maternal grandmother had passed away. She had left a small inheritance for both me and Clara. My parents, as our legal guardians at the time, had set up trust funds. We were supposed to get full access to the money when we turned 25. Clara had just had her 25th birthday. I was still a few months away from mine. My parents were the trustees of my account. My heart started to pound. No, I told myself. They wouldn't. They couldn't. That money was for my future. For a down payment on a house or to start a business. My grandmother had been very specific about her wishes. But the more I thought about it, the more it made a sick kind of sense. It would explain the sudden influx of cash. It would explain the grand gesture for Clara. I needed to find out. From my hospital bed, I used my phone to log into my online banking portal. I navigated to the section for my trust account. I had not looked at it in months, assuming it was safe, untouched. The balance that loaded on the screen made my breath catch in my throat. It was much lower than it should have been. I scrolled through the transaction history. My eyes scanned the dates, my dread growing with each line. And then I saw it. A single, massive withdrawal. The transaction was dated 3 days before Clara's party. The amount was almost exactly the sticker price of the car she had received. The description simply read, "Wire transfer." I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. It was true. They had taken my money. They had stolen from my inheritance, the money my grandmother had left for me, to buy a car for my sister. They had done this while I was getting sicker and sicker, just days before I would end up in the ICU. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It was not just that they had left me when I was dying. It was that they had financed their celebration of my sister by robbing me. I felt a wave of nausea. This was so much worse than I had imagined. This was not just emotional neglect. This was calculated financial betrayal. It was a level of deception I could not have conceived of. My first instinct was to call them, to scream at them, to demand an explanation. But I stopped myself. The cold, hard part of me that had been born in the ICU took over. A screaming match would get me nowhere. They would deny it. They would gaslight me. They would call me hysterical and ungrateful. No. I needed more than just a line on a bank statement. I needed to build a case so airtight, so undeniable, that they would have no escape. My next call was not to my parents. It was to my Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister. Carol had always been the black sheep of the family. She was divorced, had a modest job, and did not care about social status. She had always treated me with a quiet kindness that felt more genuine than my own mother's effusive but hollow affection. She picked up on the second ring. "Hello? Aunt Carol? It's me," I said, my voice hoarse. "Oh, honey, I am so glad to hear your voice. I've been so worried. Your mother said you were very sick." "I'm getting better," I said. "I'm out of the ICU now." "Thank goodness," she breathed, a genuine relief in her voice. "I was at Clara's party, and your parents told everyone you just had a bad case of the flu. I had a feeling it was more serious than that. They seemed so nonchalant." Her words were another piece of the puzzle. They had downplayed my condition to everyone. They had actively managed the information to protect their party. "Aunt Carol, I need to ask you something," I said, my voice low. "It's important." "Of course, sweetie. Anything." "Do you remember when Grandma passed away? And she left that money for me and Clara?" "I do," she said. "I was the executor of the will. I remember it very clearly. Your grandmother wanted to make sure you girls had a good start in life." "My parents are the trustees of my account until I turn 25, I said. "That's right," she confirmed. I took a deep breath. "I think they took money from it. A lot of money. I think they used it to buy Clara's car." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I was afraid she would not believe me, that she would defend her sister. Then, she spoke, her voice cold with anger. "Are you serious?" "I'm looking at the bank statement right now," I said, my voice trembling. "There's a huge withdrawal from last week." "Those absolute—" she started, then cut herself off. Okay, honey, don't you worry. I have a copy of the will and all the trust paperwork in my safe deposit box. The terms are very clear. They are not allowed to touch that money for anything other than your direct education or health expenses, and even then, they need to provide receipts. They can't just take it for a gift. That's not just wrong, that's illegal. It's theft." Hearing her say the word theft was a strange kind of validation. I was not crazy. I was not overreacting. What they had done was a crime. "What do I do?" I asked, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. "You do nothing right now," she said firmly. "You focus on your recovery. I will go to the bank on Monday and get the official documents. We are going to get to the bottom of this. And when we do, they are going to have to answer for it. I promise you that." Hanging up the phone, I felt a surge of strength. I was not alone in this anymore. I had an ally. And I had the truth, backed up by medical records, bank statements, and soon legal documents. My parents thought they were in control of the narrative. They had no idea that I was quietly rewriting the ending. The story was not going to be about their perfect family. It was going to be about their spectacular fall. And I would be the one to tell it. The day of my discharge from the hospital was surreal. My parents arrived to pick me up, all smiles and relief. They had brought me a new set of clothes and a bag of my favorite snacks. It was a performance of parental care, and it was so flawless it made my skin crawl. "We are so happy to have you back," my mother said, hugging me carefully. Her embrace felt brittle. "The house has been too quiet without you," my father added, taking my overnight bag. I had made a decision while lying in my hospital bed. I was not going home with them. I could not go back to that house, to my old room, to the life where I was expected to be grateful for their scraps of affection. I needed space. I needed distance. I needed to be somewhere I could breathe. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "I'm not coming home. Aunt Carol is going to pick me up. I'm going to stay with her for a while." Their smiles froze. My mother's face fell, a mask of confusion and hurt. My father's eyebrows knitted together in a frown. "What are you talking about?" my mother demanded. "Why would you stay with Carol? We're your parents. We should be the ones to take care of you." "I just need some quiet," I said, keeping my explanation vague. Her apartment is small. It will be less fuss. The doctor said I need to rest and avoid stress. The last part was true, and I used it as a shield. But we want to fuss over you, she insisted. Her voice was rising, laced with a familiar note of hysteria. We've been so worried. This is a slap in the face. It's not a slap in the face, Mom, I said calmly. It's what I need to do for my health. My father stepped forward, adopting his authoritative tone. This is ridiculous. You are our daughter. You will come home with us. This was their pattern. When charm failed, they resorted to demands. When demands failed, they turned to guilt. I was prepared for all of it. No, I said. It was a simple word, but it felt like I was moving a mountain. I had never said no to them like this before. Not about something so important. No? My father repeated, incredulous. What do you mean, no? I mean, I have made my decision, I said, looking him directly in the eye. Aunt Carol will be here in 10 minutes. I'm going to wait for her downstairs. I turned and walked out of the room, not waiting for their response. My legs were a little shaky, but my resolve was solid. I could hear my mother starting to cry behind me, a loud, theatrical wail designed to make me turn back. I could hear my father calling my name, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. I just kept walking. Down the hallway, into the elevator, and out into the main lobby of the hospital. Each step felt like a liberation. Aunt Carol was waiting for me by the entrance, just as she had promised. She wrapped me in a warm, tight hug that felt more real than any hug my mother had ever given me. You did it, she whispered in my ear. I'm so proud of you. As we drove away, I saw my parents rushing out of the hospital doors. They stood on the curb, watching my aunt's car pull away, their faces a mixture of fury and bewilderment. They looked small and powerless. For the first time in my life, I was the one in control. Aunt Carol's apartment was small and cozy, filled with books and plants. It was a peaceful haven. She set me up in her spare room and made me a cup of tea. I went to the bank, she said, her voice serious. She handed me a thick envelope. It's all in there. The official trust documents, the statement of withdrawal. I also spoke to a lawyer friend of mine. He said it's a clear case of breach of fiduciary duty. It's a civil matter, but it's also technically embezzlement. I opened the envelope and looked at the documents. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. My parents had violated the terms of the trust. They had stolen from me. Seeing it all laid out in black and white on official letterhead made it even more real. What did the lawyer say I should do? I asked. He said you have a few options, Carol explained. You can sue them, you can report them, which could lead to legal trouble, or you can use this as leverage to get what you want from them. I thought about it. Suing my own parents felt like a drastic, scorched earth step. But what they had done was drastic. It was a betrayal of the highest order. I don't want to destroy them, I said slowly, but I want them to understand. I want them to feel the consequences of what they did. Then we use it as leverage, Carol said, nodding. We confront them, we lay out the facts, and we make our demands. My phone started buzzing incessantly. It was a string of texts from my mother. How could you do this to us? After everything we've been through. Clara is heartbroken. You've ruined her birthday celebration. Your father is furious. You need to call us immediately. The texts were a masterclass in emotional manipulation. I was the villain. I was the one causing the pain. There was no apology, no self-reflection, just a barrage of accusations. I showed the phone to Aunt Carol. She snorted. Classic narcissist's prayer. That didn't happen. And if it did, it wasn't that bad. And if it was, that's not a big deal. And if it is, that's not my fault. And if it was, I didn't mean it. And if I did, you deserved it. She was right. That was their playbook, every single time. But this time, I was not going to play their game. I turned my phone off. The next few days were quiet. I focused on resting and regaining my strength. Aunt Carol was a wonderful nurse, bringing me food, making sure I took my medication, and most importantly, just listening. I told her everything about the years of feeling second best, about the constant pressure to be the easy child, about the conversation I overheard in the ICU. She listened without judgment, her expression growing harder with each detail I shared. "I always saw it," she said when I was finished. "I saw how they treated you compared to Clara. I just... I never knew how to interfere without making things worse for you. I'm so sorry I didn't do more." "You're doing it now," I told her, and I meant it. My silence seemed to be driving my parents crazy. They started calling Aunt Carol. She handled them with a calm firmness that I admired. "She's resting," she would say. "The doctor said she needs to avoid stress. She'll contact you when she's ready." Finally, after a week of silence from my end, my father sent me an email. The tone was different. The anger was gone, replaced by a sort of weary resignation. "We don't understand what's going on," he wrote. "Your mother is a wreck. We just want our family back together. Please just tell us what we did wrong." That last sentence was the opening I had been waiting for. Tell us what we did wrong. It was a trap, of course. They did not actually want to know. They wanted me to list my grievances so they could dismiss them one by one. But I was going to use it to set the stage for my real confrontation. I decided it was time to talk to Clara. I needed to understand her role in all of this. Was she an innocent beneficiary of our parents' favoritism, or was she a willing participant in their deception? I turned my phone back on and called her. She answered immediately, her voice sharp and angry. "So, you finally decided to crawl out from under your rock," she snapped. "Hello, Clara," I said, my voice calm. "What do you want?" she asked. "Have you come to your senses? Mom is crying all the time. You're being so selfish." "I was in the ICU, Clara," I said quietly. "The doctors thought I might die." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You always have to be the center of attention. You couldn't just let me have my one day, could you? You had to pull this stunt and try to ruin it." Her words were like a punch to the gut. She believed it. She truly believed my near-death experience was a stunt designed to steal her spotlight. The callousness was breathtaking. "So you're not even a little bit sorry that Mom and Dad left me alone in the hospital to go to your party?" I asked. "Sorry? They did the right thing. They were there for me, for once not having to cater to your endless drama. You should be grateful they even came to visit you at all." Any lingering hope I had that Clara was just an oblivious pawn in our parents' game evaporated. She was not a pawn. She was a queen, sitting on a throne built of my neglect, and she was proud of it. "I see," I said, my voice cold. "Well, I'm glad you had a good birthday. You must really love your new car." "I do," she said, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "It's amazing. Mom and Dad said it was an investment in my happiness. Maybe if you weren't such a black hole of misery, they'd invest in you too." "An investment," I repeated softly. "That's an interesting way to put it. Do you have any idea where the money for that investment came from?" "From them, obviously," she said, annoyed. "Who cares? They can afford it." "They can't," I said. "But you're right. Who cares? Enjoy the car, Clara." I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking, but not from weakness. They were shaking with a cold, hard fury. Clara knew. Maybe she did not know the exact financial details, but she knew she was getting something she was not entitled to, at my expense. Her entitlement was so absolute that she did not even feel the need to question it. She was just as guilty as they were. That was it. The final piece I needed. My hesitation about how to proceed vanished. I was done protecting them. I was done considering their feelings. They had shown me who they were, all three of them. Now, it was my turn to show them who I was. I wrote back to my father's email. "You asked what you did wrong," I wrote. "I am willing to discuss it. We all need to be in the same room. You, Mom, Clara, and me. I will come to the house for dinner on Sunday. We will talk then. I knew they would see it as a victory, a sign that I was ready to surrender. They would prepare a meal, set the table, and expect me to come home, tail between my legs, ready to apologize for the trouble I had caused. They had no idea they were not inviting me home for a reconciliation. They were inviting me over for a reckoning. And I was bringing receipts. Aunt Carol and I spent the next 2 days preparing. We made copies of everything. The ICU records highlighted and annotated. The bank statements with the withdrawal circled in red. The section of my grandmother's will that outlined the rules of the trust. We even printed out the screenshots of the party photos and my father's speech. We put it all into a neat, professional-looking folder. Are you ready for this? Carol asked me the night before the dinner. I'm nervous, I admitted, but I'm not scared. Not anymore. Good, she said. Remember, you have the truth on your side. Don't let them twist it. Don't let them make you feel guilty. Just state the facts, calmly and clearly. I will, I promised. On Sunday evening, I drove myself to my parents' house. It was the first time I had been back since before the hospital. Pulling into the driveway, I felt a pang of something that was not quite nostalgia. It was the feeling of returning to a place that was once home, but was now just a house full of bad memories. I took a deep breath, picked up the folder from the passenger seat, and walked to the front door. I rang the bell. My mother opened the door, her face arranged in a practiced expression of warm relief. You're here, she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that I did not return. We've missed you so much. My father was standing behind her, a reserved smile on his face. Welcome home, kiddo. Clara was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. She did not look up. They had cooked my favorite meal. The table was set with the good china. It was all part of the performance, the stage set for the return of the prodigal daughter. They thought they had won. We sat down to dinner. The conversation was stilted and awkward. My mother and father did most of the talking, filling the silence with cheerful chatter about their week, about the neighbors, about anything other than what we were all there to discuss. Clara remained silent, sullen. I ate quietly, waiting for my moment. Finally, my father cleared his throat and set down his fork. Well, he said, looking at me. This is nice, to have us all back together. He raised his water glass. A toast to family, and to putting all this misunderstanding behind us. My mother and Clara raised their glasses. I did not. I left my hand on the table, my fingers resting on the edge of the folder I had placed beside my plate. I don't think this is a misunderstanding, I said, my voice quiet but clear in the sudden silence. My father's smile faltered. What do you mean? You asked me to tell you what you did wrong, I said, looking from my father to my mother. I'm here to do that. My mother's face tightened. Can we not do this now? We're having a lovely dinner. No, I said firmly. We're doing this now. I opened the folder. The first thing I pulled out was a copy of the ICU doctor's notes. I placed it in the center of the table. You told everyone I had a nasty flu, I said. This is a note from my doctor on the day of Clara's party. It says, prognosis is guarded, multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. The doctor told you I was in critical condition, but you told people I was being dramatic. My mother paled. My father stared at the paper as if it was a snake. We didn't want to worry people, my father mumbled. You didn't want to ruin the party, I corrected him. I pulled out the next document, the screenshots from social media. I laid them on the table. The smiling faces, the champagne toast, my father's speech. You weren't worried. You were celebrating. That's not fair, my mother cried. We were putting on a brave face for Clara's sake. For Clara's sake, I repeated. Everything is always for Clara's sake. I looked at my sister. She was finally looking up from her phone, her eyes wide with a mixture of anger and panic. Now, let's talk about the car, I said, my voice dropping. I pulled out the bank statement and the copy of my grandmother's will. I placed them side by side on top of the other papers. A beautiful car. A wonderful gift, I said. But you didn't pay for it, did you? I pointed to the withdrawal on the statement. This is my trust fund, the money Grandma left for me. And this, I tapped the will, is the legal document that says you are not allowed to touch that money except for my education or health. It says you have breached your fiduciary duty. My aunt's lawyer has another word for it. He calls it embezzlement. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. My father's face had gone from pale to a blotchy red. My mother looked like she was going to be sick. Clara was staring at the papers, her mouth slightly open. That's not true, my father stammered, but there was no conviction in his voice. He could not deny the evidence in front of him. It is true, I said. You stole from me. You stole my inheritance to buy a gift for my sister. And you did it while I was in the hospital, fighting for my life. You didn't just leave me. You robbed me on your way out the door. My mother burst into tears. Not quiet, sad tears, but loud, heaving sobs of self-pity. How can you say these things to us? We love you. I feel a cold calm settle over me. The time for being hurt is over. Now is the time for truth. Love? I ask, my voice devoid of emotion. Is that what you call it? Leaving your daughter in the ICU to go to a party? Calling her a drama queen when her organs are failing? Stealing her inheritance? That's not love. I don't know what it is, but it's not love. Clara finally found her voice. You're just jealous, she shrieked, pointing a finger at me. You've always been jealous of me. I turned my head slowly to look at her. I am not jealous, I think. I am horrified. Jealous of what, Clara? I ask. That our parents value a party more than my life? That they had to steal from me to prove how much they love you? No, I'm not jealous. I'm disgusted. And I pity you. Because their love is something you have to buy. And it wasn't even their money. Clara's face crumpled. The smugness was gone, replaced by a raw, ugly shock. She had never been spoken to like this before. She had no defense against the truth. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. That is enough, he roared, his face contorted with rage. He was trying to regain control, to intimidate me into silence. It did not work. I did not flinch. I just looked at him. I am not that little girl anymore, I realize. His anger has no power over me. No, it's not enough, I say. We're not done yet. I have a list of demands. My mother stopped crying and looked at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. Demands? Yes, I said. First, you will repay the money you took from my trust. All of it. With interest calculated from the day you stole it. You have 30 days. My father opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. Second, I continued, my voice like ice, you will write a letter to the entire family. The same people you lied to at the party. In that letter, you will tell them the truth. That I was not at home with the flu. That I was in the ICU with sepsis. And you will apologize for your misleading statements. You can't ask us to do that, my mother wailed. It would be humiliating. You want to talk about humiliating? I shot back. Try waking up in the ICU to find out your parents chose a party over you. Try seeing pictures of your family celebrating while you're wondering if you're going to live through the night. That is humiliating. They had no answer to that. And third, I said, delivering the final blow, after you have done those two things, I am done. We are done. I want no contact. No calls, no texts, no emails. You will not be a part of my life anymore. The finality in my voice hung in the air. This was not a negotiation. It was a verdict. My father stared at me, his rage collapsing into a desperate plea. You can't mean that. We're your family. You stopped being my family the moment you walked out of that hospital room, I said. I stood up from the table, leaving the folder of evidence in the center like a tombstone. You have my terms. You know what you have to do. If the money is not back in my account in 30 days, Aunt Carol's lawyer will be in touch, and he won't be as polite as I've been. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I did not look back. As I walked to the front door, I could hear the chaos erupting behind me. My mother's wails, my father's furious shouts, Clara's shrill accusations. It was the sound of their perfect world shattering. It was the sound of consequences. I closed the door behind me and did not feel a single shred of regret. I felt free. The 30 days that followed were a strange mixture of silence and noise. The noise came from my phone, which I had to put on silent because of the constant barrage of calls and texts from unknown numbers, flying monkeys sent by my parents. Cousins, old family friends, even my mother's hairdresser, all calling to tell me I was tearing the family apart, that I was being cruel and unforgiving. I blocked each number without responding. The silence was from my parents and Clara. They did not contact me directly. They were trying to use social pressure to break me, their favorite tactic. It did not work. Aunt Carol was my rock. She fielded calls from her side of the family, calmly explaining that this was a private matter and that there was more to the story than they knew. Your mother is telling everyone that you're mentally unstable from the illness, she told me one evening over tea. She's saying you're delusional and that I'm manipulating you. I sighed. Of course, that was their new narrative. I was the crazy one. It was easier than admitting the truth. Does anyone believe her? Carol smiled grimly. Some of the old guard do, the ones who have always enabled her. But most people are starting to ask questions. Your mother's story has too many holes in it, and your father has gone completely silent, which is making him look guilty. On the 29th day, I checked my bank account. The money was there. The full amount, plus a few $1,000s extra. There was no note, no apology, just a cold electronic transaction. It was their surrender. They had met my first demand. 2 days later, Aunt Carol called me. You need to see this, she said. Check your email. I opened my laptop. There was a mass email in my inbox. The sender was my father. The subject line was an important family update. It had been sent to dozens of relatives. I clicked it open, my heart pounding. The letter was stilted and formal. It was clearly written by a lawyer. It began by expressing their deepest regrets for any misinformation that was shared at Clara's party. While we were celebrating, it read, our other daughter was not at home with the flu, as we had stated. She was, in fact, in the intensive care unit in critical condition with a severe septic infection. Our decision to proceed with the party and to downplay the severity of her illness was a grave error in judgment, born of stress and poor communication. We deeply regret the pain and confusion our actions have caused. We are taking steps to rectify our mistakes and heal our family. It was not a heartfelt apology. It was a carefully worded piece of damage control. But it was the truth. It was a public admission of their lie. They had met my second demand. The fallout was immediate. Aunt Carol started getting calls. Relatives who had previously been sympathetic to my parents were now horrified. The business partner my father had been trying to impress at the party, who was on the email list, sent a curt reply saying he was reevaluating their potential venture. My parents' carefully constructed public image was crumbling. I received a single text from Clara. I hate you. You've ruined everything. I typed back a single sentence. You have a car that was paid for with my inheritance. Sell it. Give me the rest of my money. She did not reply, but a week later, another large sum of money appeared in my account. It was the approximate value of the car. I blocked her number for good. I kept my end of the bargain. I maintained my silence. I moved into a new apartment, a small, sunny place that was all mine. I re-enrolled in my university classes. I used the money from my inheritance, now rightfully returned to me, to pay off my tuition and my medical bills. I was finally independent, free from their financial and emotional control. Months passed. The quiet in my life was a balm. I focused on my studies, on my health, on rebuilding my life on my own terms. I had dinner with Aunt Carol every Sunday. She was my family now. One day, she told me that my parents had sold their large house. They had downsized to a small condo in a less prestigious neighborhood. The business deal had fallen through, and their social circle had shrunk considerably. They were isolated, living with the consequences of their actions. Clara, she said, had moved to another city, unable to face the shame. I felt a flicker of something, but it was not pity. It was a distant, detached sense of justice. They had made their choices. They had valued image over integrity, favoritism over fairness, a party over a person. And they had lost everything that mattered to them. I graduated from university with honors. Aunt Carol was in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I thought about the journey that had brought me there. The girl in the ICU bed, alone and betrayed, seemed like a different person. But she was not. She was the one who had found the strength to fight back. She was the one who had taught me that my silence was a currency I was no longer willing to spend. That evening, celebrating with Aunt Carol at a small restaurant, I raised my glass. "To new beginnings," I said. "And to knowing your worth," she added, her eyes shining with pride. I thought of my parents and Clara, scattered and diminished by their own choices. They had taught me a painful but valuable lesson. Family is not an obligation. It is not defined by blood or by shared history. It is defined by who shows up, by who stays, by who tells you the truth, even when it's hard. They had failed on every count. They had called my sickness drama, but in the end, their entire life was the real performance. And when the curtain fell, they were left with an empty stage. I, on the other hand, was just getting started. The peace I felt was profound. It was a quiet, steady strength that came from within. It was the peace of knowing I had saved myself,